The desert winds of Carvex howled through the jagged basalt formations, carrying stinging particles of crimson sand that pelted the assembled cadets. The Torvex system's most inhospitable moon shimmered under the punishing rays of its distant sun, heat waves distorting the horizon like a mirage. Marcus Flynn squinted against the glare, adjusting the standard-issue environmental suit that felt wholly inadequate for the harsh conditions. Around him, his alien classmates prepared their high-tech equipment with practiced efficiency, casting occasional glances at the human's minimal gear. "Flynn!" barked Commander Velnak. The Zenturi officer's four eyes narrowing as he approached. His exoskeleton clicked against the rocky terrain with each step. "You've brought insufficient supplies for this survival exercise. Perhaps you misunderstood the parameters." Marcus straightened his posture. "No, sir. I understood perfectly." The commander's upper eyes blinked in what Marcus had come to recognize as skepticism. 72 hours on Carvex requires more than a pack of basic tools and emergency rations, even for a Deathworlder. The term made Marcus suppress a sigh. Since joining the Intergalactic Academy, Deathworlder had followed him like a shadow, a backhanded compliment acknowledging humanity's evolution on a planet considered dangerous by galactic standards, but also implying primitive resilience over intelligence. "With respect, Commander, the exercise guidelines stated minimal equipment only. I believe I've complied with both the letter and spirit of the instructions." Velnak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "As you wish. Your assessment begins now. All cadets will establish sustainable shelter, secure water sources, and maintain regular communication with base camp. Extraction in 72 standard hours." The commander stepped away, leaving the 24 cadets representing 12 species to begin their final survival qualification. Marcus watched as the others activated sophisticated shelter pods, deployed sensor arrays, and released mapping drones. Their technology sparkled in the harsh sunlight, gleaming with promise and efficiency. Rhea, an Altheron with translucent skin that rippled with bioluminescent patterns, approached Marcus with obvious concern in her large, pupilless eyes. "Marcus, I have redundant hydration tech. You're welcome to share if your supplies prove inadequate." Marcus smiled, appreciating the gesture despite its condescension. "Thanks, Rhea, but I'll manage. Good luck with your setup." He turned away, scanning the terrain methodically. Unlike his classmates who relied on advanced tech to identify resources, Marcus had spent weeks studying Carvex's topography and meteorological patterns. He'd noticed something none of them seemed interested in: the wreckage of an old supply shuttle half buried in sand about 2 kilometers east of their drop point. While the others focused on deploying their equipment in the immediate vicinity, Marcus shouldered his pack and began walking toward the distant metal gleam, barely visible through the heat haze. The trek was punishing. Carvex's gravity was 1.2 times Earth standard, and the temperature hovered around 45 degrees Celsius, despite the environmental suit's cooling functions. An hour later, sweat-soaked but satisfied, Marcus reached the wreckage. The shuttle had crashed years ago, abandoned after salvage teams had removed the valuable components. What remained was a treasure trove for someone who understood the value of seemingly worthless debris. Broken metal alloy sheets, reflective silver thermal barriers, scraps of polymer cables, and fragments of filtration systems lay scattered and half-buried. "Perfect," Marcus muttered, pulling tools from his pack. He worked methodically, collecting pieces of metal alloy that could form a frame, thermal barriers to reflect the brutal sun, and cables that could bind his structure together. Each piece required careful extraction from the sand, cleaning, and assessment. Hours passed as Marcus built his collection, periodically checking the sky and his basic chronometer. As the alien sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Marcus heard the distinctive whine of approaching drones. Looking up, He saw 3 of his classmates' mapping units circling overhead. He waved, knowing the devices would relay his position back to their owners. No doubt they were surprised to find him so far from the landing zone. The drones lingered briefly before departing, and Marcus returned to his work with renewed urgency. Night on Carvex brought plummeting temperatures and increased meteoroid activity in the thin atmosphere. He needed shelter before darkness fell, hauling his salvaged materials back toward the base camp area. Marcus noticed the changed atmosphere immediately. Cadets clustered in agitated groups, their shelter units half-assembled as they pointed at handheld devices and the darkening sky. Velnak stood at the center, his usual commanding posture now rigid with tension. The commander's communication unit projected a holographic alert, visible even from Marcus's position. "Attention all Academy personnel." The message repeated in Standard Galactic. "Unexpected Level 4 meteor shower detected approaching Carvex. This is not part of the training scenario. Repeat, this is a real emergency. Seek immediate shelter. Estimated impact in 90 minutes." Chaos erupted among the cadets. The Lenari twins, with their 6 limbs, frantically tried to reconfigure their shelter's shields. Drexel, the crystalline Pyraxian, emitted distress lights that pulsed across his translucent body. Journey Girl, the living plant collective who communicated through pheromones, released a cloud of panic scent that made several nearby cadets sneeze uncontrollably. "Activate emergency beacons," Velnak ordered, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Prepare for immediate evacuation." "Evacuation ships can't approach during a meteor shower," called out a Caldaxian cadet, her scaled skin flushed with stress hormones. "Atmospheric navigation becomes impossible with that much debris." "Then enhance your shelters to withstand impacts," Velnak countered, though his voice carried less certainty than his words. Marcus watched as the high-tech equipment that had seemed so impressive hours earlier now revealed critical flaws. The Altheron's hydration system sparked and smoked when its force field generator overloaded. The Zenturi brothers' mapping drones crashed when their guidance systems encountered atmospheric interference. The Quartilion's energy shelter kept flickering and destabilizing as power fluctuations rippled through its matrix. Marcus dropped his salvaged materials and stepped forward. "Commander, permission to speak?" Velnak turned all 4 eyes toward him. "What is it, Flynn?" "We don't have time to evacuate or enhance individual shelters. We need to consolidate our resources and build one reinforced structure." "With what?" demanded Velnak. "The standard-issue equipment cannot withstand direct meteoroid impacts." Marcus gestured to his pile of salvage. "With this. The old shuttle's hull alloy was designed to withstand micrometeoroid impacts and atmospheric entry. If we combine my salvage with components from your tech, we can build something strong enough to protect everyone." The commander studied him, mandibles working silently as he calculated options. "You have 70 minutes. Cadet Flynn, make it count." With that authorization, Marcus took charge with a confidence that surprised even himself. "I need volunteers with engineering experience. Rhea Drexel, Journey Girl. Your species have natural strengths that can help. Everyone else, start breaking down your shelters for usable components." The next hour passed in a blur of frantic activity. Marcus directed the construction of a low, dome-shaped structure using the salvaged alloy sheets as the primary frame. The curved design would help deflect incoming objects rather than absorbing direct impacts. He positioned the reflective thermal barriers as an outer layer, reasoning that the material's heat-resistant properties might provide additional protection. "Angle the supports at 45 degrees, he instructed Drexel, whose crystalline limbs could precise cut the metal without tools. "Rhea, your bioluminescence can help us work in the shadows. Can you increase output?" The Altheron nodded, her skin brightening to cast blue-white light across their workspace. Journey Girl's pheromone language shifted from panic to determination as her vine-like appendages wove cables through the structure's seams, providing tension and stability. Velnak worked alongside them, his initial skepticism fading as the shelter took shape. The trajectory calculations indicate heaviest impacts to the northwest, he reported, mandibles clicking rapidly. We should reinforce that side. Already on it, Marcus replied, directing 2 Caldaxian cadets to layer additional alloy sheets on the indicated section. With 15 minutes remaining before projected impact, their makeshift shelter stood complete, an ugly, asymmetrical dome of mismatched materials that looked nothing like the sleek technology the Academy prized, but which Marcus believed would hold. An entrance tunnel constructed from curved alloy created an airlock-style barrier that would prevent structural collapse if the main door took a hit. "Everyone inside," Marcus called, helping the last cadets crawl through the narrow entrance. 24 bodies of vastly different physiologies crowded the shelter's interior, which Marcus had deliberately kept small to maximize structural integrity. Proximity will be uncomfortable, he acknowledged as limbs, appendages, and exoskeletons pressed against each other. But body heat will help when temperatures drop, and the tight space maximizes our structural integrity. Commander Velnak positioned himself near the entrance, monitoring the sky through a small viewport Marcus had created from a transparent polymer salvaged from a broken sensor dome. "First impacts in approximately 2 minutes, the commander announced, his usually authoritative voice tight with tension. Marcus made a final check of the shelter's supports, tightening cable bindings and ensuring the reflective material remained securely fastened. Outside, the wind had intensified, carrying an ominous whistling that grew louder with each passing moment. "Flynn," Velnak said quietly, pulling Marcus aside, "if this fails—" "It won't," Marcus interrupted, with more certainty than he felt. "But if it does, we'll adapt. That's what survival is about." The first impacts came as distant thuds that sent vibrations through the ground. Dust sifted from the shelter's ceiling as the cadets fell silent, each wrapped in private thoughts and fears. Then the real barrage began. The sound was like nothing Marcus had experienced, a cacophony of explosive impacts that shook the very air. The shelter trembled, metal groaning under stress. A section of the ceiling bowed inward alarmingly when a larger meteoroid struck nearby, sending a shockwave through the ground. "Support beam!" Marcus shouted over the din, pointing to the compromised section. Journey Girl reacted instantly, extending 3 vine-like limbs to brace the sagging metal. Drexel pressed his crystalline body against the wall, providing additional reinforcement through his natural rigidity. Outside, the apocalyptic storm intensified. Through the small viewport, Marcus glimpsed streaks of fire tearing across the sky, impacting with explosions of dust and rock. The temperature inside the shelter rose steadily as meteoroids superheated the atmosphere. A tremendous crash shook the shelter violently, throwing several cadets to the floor. A jagged crack appeared in the northeast section of the roof, widening as the structure groaned. "It's going to breach!" cried Rhea, her skin flashing with patterns of distress. Marcus lunged for his pack, extracting the emergency sealant he'd brought as part of his minimal supplies. "Everyone push up against the ceiling! Counter the pressure!" As the cadets pressed upward with limbs, appendages, and in some cases, their entire bodies, Marcus applied the sealant along the crack. The specialized compound designed for emergency hull repairs spread across the fissure, hardening almost instantly under the heat. "Hold it steady!" Marcus shouted, as another impact sent vibrations through their shelter. "The compound needs 30 seconds to cure completely." Those 30 seconds stretched into an eternity. Sweat poured down Marcus's face as he maintained pressure on the sealed crack, counting silently while explosions continued outside. When he finally pulled his hands away, the repair held firm despite the ongoing bombardment. For 3 terrifying hours, the meteor shower pounded Carvex's surface. Inside the makeshift shelter, the cadets maintained a rotation of support duties, reinforcing weak points, monitoring the structure's integrity, and providing assistance to those injured by the violent shaking. 2 Xanthari cadets suffered fractured limbs when a particularly massive impact threw them against the wall. A quartillion developed respiratory distress from the dust and heat. Marcus directed basic first aid from his limited supplies, while Commander Velnak maintained communication attempts with the Academy base despite the atmospheric interference. Gradually, the impacts grew less frequent. The intervals between explosions lengthened until, finally, a strange silence fell. The cadets held their breath collectively, waiting for the next assault. When 5 minutes passed without impact, Velnak cautiously checked his instruments. "The meteor shower appears to be subsiding," he announced. "Atmospheric readings show decreasing debris density." A collective sigh of relief filled the shelter, though no one moved. They had learned the value of caution. "We should reinforce the structure before we celebrate," Marcus suggested, already examining the stress points throughout their shelter. There could be additional waves. With the immediate danger past, the cadets worked with renewed purpose, reinforcing their shelter using techniques Marcus demonstrated. The Altheron cadets applied bioluminescent secretions to seal smaller cracks. The Centauri brothers used their exoskeletal strength to reshape bent alloy back into supportive positions. Even the Kaldaxians, whose species prided themselves on intellectual rather than physical contributions, helped secure loose cables and patch torn sections of the reflective barriers. As they worked, Marcus noticed a significant shift in the group's dynamics. Species that rarely interacted at the Academy now communicated and collaborated with growing efficiency. The shelter, born of desperation and cobbled together from trash, had become a unifying project. "Commander," Marcus approached Velnak as they finished reinforcing the entrance tunnel. "Any word from the Academy?" The Centauri officer's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had come to recognize as reluctant approval. "Communications are still disrupted, but automated emergency protocols will dispatch rescue once atmospheric conditions permit safe approach. Estimated arrival, 8 to 10 hours. Marcus nodded. "The shelter should hold, but we should prepare for temperature fluctuations. Carvex nights drop below freezing." "Indeed." Velnak paused, his 4 eyes studying Marcus with new consideration. "Your solution was unorthodox, Flynn, but effective. The Academy training emphasizes technological approaches to survival challenges." "Technology is valuable," Marcus acknowledged, "but understanding basic principles matters more. The best technology is the one that works when you need it." The commander's upper eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "A perspective perhaps undervalued in our curriculum." As predicted, temperatures plummeted as Carvex's night cycle deepened. The cadets huddled together for warmth, species differences temporarily forgotten in the face of shared survival. Marcus organized heat conservation rotations, placing cold-tolerant species like the Paraxians at the shelter's periphery, while those more vulnerable to temperature extremes remained central. Journey Girl's collective consciousness directed her plant-based body to produce warming spores that raised the ambient temperature by several degrees. The Lanari twins, whose 6 limbs contained specialized thermal regulation organs, positioned themselves strategically to distribute heat throughout the shelter. During those long hours of waiting, conversation flowed more freely than it ever had in Academy classrooms. Cadets shared stories of their homeworlds, discussed the effectiveness of their training, and speculated about future assignments. Marcus found himself answering countless questions about Earth, describing its varied ecosystems and how they had shaped humanity's approach to survival challenges. "Your planet experiences meteor showers too?" asked Rhea, her translucent skin now emitting a softer, more relaxed bioluminescence. "Not like this," Marcus smiled. "But we have natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, that have taught us to prepare for the unexpected." "Yet your Academy application stated you had no formal survival training before enrollment," noted Velnak, who had been listening quietly. Marcus shrugged. My family lived in a remote area. When technology fails there, you either learn to improvise or you don't survive. My father called it practical engineering, understanding how things work at the most basic level, so you can rebuild when necessary. The conversation continued through the night, interrupted periodically by distant impacts as smaller meteoroids continued to strike Carvex's surface. Each time, the cadets tensed, but their shelter held firm against the diminishing assault. Dawn brought a spectacularly altered landscape. When Marcus carefully opened their shelter's entrance to peer outside, he barely recognized the training zone, where flat desert had stretched before. Now, crater fields pockmarked the surface. Glassy areas showed where sand had melted under extreme heat. Meteoroid fragments glittered everywhere, some still smoking from atmospheric entry. Atmospheric conditions stabilizing, announced Velnak, checking his partially functioning communicator. Rescue shuttle approaching. Estimated arrival, 45 minutes. The cadets emerged cautiously from their shelter, blinking in the harsh morning light. The devastation surrounding them brought home the reality of their survival in a way that statistics and warnings never could have. We would have died, whispered Drexel, his crystalline form refracting sunlight in disoriented patterns, if we had relied solely on our individual shelters. If not for Flynn, added one of the Zenturi brothers, mandibles clicking in the species' equivalent of emphasis. Marcus felt uncomfortable under the sudden attention. We all contributed. That's what made it work. But the concept was yours, insisted Rhea. When the rest of us panicked, you saw an opportunity and discarded materials. Commander Velnak approached, his exoskeleton gleaming in the morning light. Cadet Flynn, a moment. Marcus followed the commander a short distance from the group, tensing instinctively. Despite their shelter's success, he had technically violated Academy protocols by abandoning the designated training zone to salvage materials. Sir, he asked cautiously. Your actions yesterday, Velnak began. All four eyes focused intently on Marcus's face. Constituted a violation of several Academy regulations. Marcus stood straighter. Yes, sir. You left the designated training area without authorization. You directed other cadets without command clearance. You utilized non-standard materials not approved for survival exercises. The commander's voice remained neutral, giving no indication of his thoughts. I accept full responsibility, sir. Velnak's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Marcus couldn't quite interpret. In doing so, you saved 24 lives, including my own. Marcus blinked in surprise. The Academy values protocol, Cadet Flynn, because consistency ensures predictable outcomes in standard scenarios. But space is rarely standard, and survival often depends on adapting beyond established parameters. The commander paused, his upper eyes narrowing slightly. Your Earth perspective brought something valuable to this group. Thank you, sir. Don't misunderstand. Velnak continued briskly. Official reprimands will be issued for protocol violations, but I will also be recommending curriculum adjustments based on yesterday's events. Perhaps a more balanced approach between technological solutions and improvisational techniques. Marcus suppressed a smile. From a rigid commander like Velnak, this was practically effusive praise. The rescue shuttle appeared as a glinting speck in the sky, growing larger as it descended toward their position. Medical teams would attend to the injured cadets, and debriefing sessions would analyze every decision made during the crisis. Marcus knew his unorthodox approach would face scrutiny from Academy officials who prized technological solutions above all else. Yet, as he watched his fellow cadets gathered around their makeshift shelter, the ugly, asymmetrical dome that had saved their lives, Marcus felt a quiet confidence. The universe didn't care about regulations or technological sophistication. It respected only what worked. The shuttle landed in a swirl of crimson dust, its ramp extending to the ground with mechanical precision. As the cadets prepared to board, Rhea approached Marcus one last time. "Will you teach me?" she asked, her bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that indicated sincere interest. "About how you think when resources are limited?" Behind her, several other cadets paused, clearly interested in his response. "I'd be happy to exchange knowledge," Marcus replied. "Your bioluminescence saved us when we needed light. Journey Girl's temperature regulation kept us from freezing. Drexel's crystalline structure reinforced our weakest points. We all have something to teach each other." Commander Velnak called for boarding, and the cadets filed into the shuttle. As they lifted off from Carvex's scarred surface, Marcus gazed down at their shelter, now just a tiny dome amid a crater-pocked landscape. It looked insignificant from this height. Yet, it represented something profound. Different species setting aside their technological advantages and biological differences to create something greater than the sum of its parts. In the Academy's Grand Assembly Hall 3 days later, the survival exercise cadets stood at attention as the Commandant addressed the gathered students and faculty. The official report had been filed, analyzed, and now conclusions would be presented. Commandant Ilara, a Medusan whose serpentine neural pathways floated visibly in the transparent cranial fluid of her species, spoke with the measured precision for which she was known. "The incident on Carvex has prompted significant reassessment of our survival curriculum," she announced, her voice resonating through the hall. "While technological solutions remain central to our training, the events during the meteor shower demonstrated the critical importance of adaptability, improvisation, and interspecies cooperation under extreme conditions." Marcus stood rigidly in formation, aware of the glances directed his way from throughout the hall. The story of the human cadet who built a shelter from trash, while aliens panicked, had spread throughout the academy, growing more elaborate with each retelling. "Cadet Marcus Flynn," the Commandant continued, "step forward." Marcus moved with practiced precision, halting at the designated position before the Commandant's podium. "Your actions during the Carvex incident violated 17 Academy protocols," stated Commandant Ilara, her neural pathways pulsing with increased activity. "These violations have been recorded in your permanent file." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled cadets. Marcus maintained his posture, expression neutral. "Additionally," the Commandant continued, "you demonstrated exceptional leadership, resourcefulness, and practical application of survival principles under catastrophic conditions. These qualities represent the core values our Academy was established to nurture." She gestured to Commander Velnak, who approached carrying a small metallic insignia. "Therefore, you are hereby granted provisional promotion to Cadet Lieutenant, with assignment to assist in the restructuring of our survival training protocols. Your perspective will be valuable as we integrate more versatile approaches alongside our technological curriculum." Marcus accepted the insignia with steady hands, though his heart raced. "Thank you, Commandant. I'm honored to serve." "Your first assignment begins tomorrow," she concluded. "Commander Velnak will provide details." Dismissed. As the assembly dispersed, Marcus found himself surrounded by cadets from species he'd barely interacted with before the Carvex incident. Questions came from all directions, about Earth survival techniques, about his thoughts on equipment modifications, about the possibility of cross-species training groups. Rhea appeared at his side, her bioluminescence pulsing with excitement. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Flynn. Does this mean you'll be teaching officially now?" "Apparently so," Marcus replied, still processing the unexpected promotion. "Though I have as much to learn as to teach." Commander Velnak approached through the crowd, his exoskeleton polished to formal perfection. "Lieutenant Flynn, a moment of your time." The commander led Marcus to a quieter corner of the hall. "Your assignment begins at 600 tomorrow. We're taking a select group of cadets to Marish." Marcus felt his eyes widen involuntarily. Marish was infamous, a swamp planet with toxic atmosphere and predatory flora. Sir, Marish is significantly more dangerous than Carvex. Indeed. Velnak's mandibles clicked in what Marcus now recognized as satisfaction. And this time, we're removing all technology from the exercise. Cadets will have only basic tools and their combined knowledge. That's a dramatic shift from standard curriculum. The universe is not standard, Lieutenant. The meteor shower taught us that lesson decisively. The commander's upper eyes narrowed. The question is whether you're prepared to lead in truly adverse conditions. Marcus thought of his childhood on Earth's barely habitable northern territories after the climate shifts. He thought of his father's lessons on finding solutions in the most unlikely places. He thought of the ugly, asymmetrical dome on Carvex that had saved 24 lives. "I'm ready, Commander." "Excellent." Velnak handed him a data tablet. "Study these files tonight. Marish has peculiarities even a Deathworlder might find challenging." As the commander walked away, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Deathworlder no longer sounded like an insult, more like a qualification. Perhaps that had been the most important lesson from Carvex, that differences in evolutionary background, physical capabilities, and problem-solving approaches weren't weaknesses to overcome, but strengths to combine. The Academy was changing, and he was now part of that change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges on a hostile swamp planet. There would be dangers, unexpected complications, and moments when survival seemed impossible. But Marcus knew that whatever Marish threw at them, the solution would be found in the combined strengths of diverse species working together, and in the practical creativity that emerged when sophisticated technology failed. He tucked the data tablet under his arm and headed toward his quarters to prepare. After all, a lieutenant needed to set an example, especially a human lieutenant in an intergalactic academy that was just beginning to understand what Deathworlders brought to the stars.